we have to remember that Kris is still just a kid in elementary school after all. I'm not saying it's
Ain't nobody told me nothing!
What's up, YouTube? It's your girl Collard, and welcome back to the Galaxy, baby. And today we are going to be talking about my anime glasses. Goodness gracious, the glare. The first one we about to watch is from Game Theory, Matt Pack himself. So let's get into this.
Buddy's favorite
#1 theorist.
Matthew R. Patrick. Oh, if it isn't a
Loyal theorist.
hey, well, have I got
The
something
amount of
for you?
of
You want
work
it,
he
you
puts
want
into these
Deltarune.
theories
Don't
and
you?
these
All you have to do
videos
is
in
show me
general.
your-
Subscribe button.
Go on. Why don't you just show it off? This is your chance to be a big shot. A big shot. Big shot. Big.
Chill out. Since Game Theories remain,
Welcome to Game Theory, the show where everyone's a
Big shot.
loyal theorist. As I continued to round out my time hosting the channel, one thing that was really important to me was revisiting iconic theories from throughout the show's history. And perhaps no theory is as beloved as the Sans' Nest theory. Now, back in the day, this one was a bit controversial. Not exactly sure why, though. It seemed pretty obvious to me that this small boy from Earthbound was the same as this Tumblr sexy man from Undertale. People said I was crazy. And now, all these years later, I finally understand why. You see, after all these years, Toby Fox finally decided to come online and set the record straight, sending me this tweet in the wake of my announcement video, and
hold on. Thanks for the theories, Matt Pack.
suddenly everything clicked. Sans isn't Ness. Sans and Papyrus are Ness. No wonder
Get out.
you all were so frustrated about that episode. I am
Get
so
out.
sorry, and I feel so much better now. Thank you. Anyway, all that ancient history. What I want to talk about today is Toby Fox's latest game, Deltarune. Specifically the newest chapter, which just released in September of 2021. All right, so
Woo, I
admittedly,
missed
I
you
might be a
late.
little bit late to this one. And since it's been a
I'm
hot minute
real
since we last
late.
covered the franchise, let me just catch you up with where we stand right now. Off the bat, it's important to remember that Deltarune is a spiritual successor to Undertale. Even though a lot of the same characters show up in both, they function independently from their first outing. This time we play as Kris, a quiet, lonely human child in a world of monsters, adopted into the family of Toriel, Asgore, and Asriel. See what I mean about the same characters repeating themselves? In Chapter 1, Kris gets paired up with the school bully Susie to go find some chalk, only to fall into the Dark World, a fantasy realm of living cards and toys powered by something called a dark fountain. Along the way, they meet the Dark Prince named Dulcie, whose name is an anagram of Asriel. Just something to keep in mind.
Oh, okay. So I had thought like it was like in their minds, like they're like in the rooms, like playing pretend is what I thought. But if it's the theory of like the dark fountain is actually making the items in the room come to life, that's something. Okay.
Mine. We quickly learn of a prophecy where Kris, Susie, and Ralsei are meant to restore balance to both the worlds of light and dark. After much ducking and dodging with our heart-shaped object, Susie learns to accept friendship, and together the team defeats the evil king and escape back to the real world, where suddenly the pair find themselves in a supply room scattered with toys and games. It was all pretend. Or was it? Either way, it's a happy ending, right? Well, it would have been if it hadn't
So
been
it's
for
still up
Kris
in the
suddenly
air.
ripping out their heart, shoving it into a birdcage, and then showing off their shiny new knife. It was quite the twist ending, and it left us with a lot of questions. Questions that we all hoped would be answered in Chapter 2 3 years later. So what did we learn when Chapter 2 finally released? Well,
Was
Kris
it-
used that knife to eat a pie. No joke, just ate a pie. And from there, Chapter 2 follows a similar pattern to Chapter 1.
Did he?
Susie and Kris find a dark fountain in the library, which leads them to the cyber world.
Or
It's there
did
that
they?
find an
Let me
evil
go ahead
computer
and clear this
queen
up.
processing-
Let me go ahead and clear this up because there is a debate right now going on in the comments of one of my shorts about Kris's pronouns, because I have been calling Kris a he the entire time. And so there seems to be a debate about that. So I'm going to do my best to call them them and they. I'm going to do my best. What happens is like stuff starts getting locked in. So I'm going to try to unlock it and replace it with they, okay?
to capturing their friends, the shy Noelle and the obnoxious know-it-all Birdly. Noelle learns to be confident, Birdly learns to be more humble, and everyone teams up to defeat the queen in a final game of
Did
punch-outs,
Birdly
because
actually
that's
learn that?
exactly
I
what
don't
you
think
expect
Birdly
from a
learned
turn-based
that.
RPG. It's yet another happy ending until Kris removes their heart once more, slashes their mom's tires, and then uses the knife to open up a dark
That's what
portal
I don't
in the middle
understand.
of the living room. So what
Why
does this
are
all
they
mean?
slashing
Doesn't it
tires?
immediately fly in the face of that prophecy Rolsey gave us at the start of chapter 1? It specifically sets up Kris, Susie, and Rolsey as the heroes of the story, the ones who are going to restore balance to the worlds of light and dark, and yet here's Kris running around opening dark fountains, making it more unbalanced. Does that mean that the prophecy then is
They take their
bogus?
heart out first, though.
Oh no, dear theorists. In fact, instead of breaking from the prophecy, I think Kris is actually in the process of fulfilling it. How? Well, best grab
I
your
think so,
pencil
too,
swords,
to be
my
honest.
friends, because I believe that this single action's revealing to us how the game is gonna end. The truth hidden inside that prophecy, and who the final boss of the game is ultimately gonna be. So to start with, let's actually jump into the specific quote.
Right,
from
because it seems like the
Three
prophecy
heroes appear at
is
World's Edge,
giving
a
wrong.
human, a monster, and a prince from the dark. Only they can seal the fountains and banish the angels' heaven. Only then will balance be
There isn't.
restored, and the
Ooh, there
world
isn't another
saved
human,
from
is there?
destruction. Now, this seems pretty cut and dry. We know who the heroes are, Susie, Kris, and Rolsey. We know that the dark fountains turn real-world locations into fantasy-like adventures. We also understand the concept of saving the world. It's video gaming 101. But there's a line in here that I really want to focus on. One that's a lot more ambiguous. Banish the angels' heaven. What? It's a weird thing to say. Like, what
I
is
didn't
an
even notice that,
angel's
to be
heaven?
honest.
And more importantly, why would we want to banish something like that? Normally, angels in heaven, they tend to be good things, right? In my initial theories on this game, I suggested that the angel was Azrael, Kris's brother who's away at college, the one that broke Kris's spirit and left them all alone at home. In chapter 1, we're told that Kris and Azrael made an angel for their youth group, only to waste time on giving it massive wings, just like Azrael's final form from Undertale. And given that we believed Azrael to be the one causing Kris to run away and hide in this fantasy dark world in the first place, it would make sense for the angel and angel's
Diving
heaven
into
to be
some
connected to Azrael. But then
Deltarune.
chapter 2
Okay.
came out, and
Theory.
a
Yeah.
challenger for the
So
title of
I've already
Angel came
played
into play,
chapters
Noelle.
1
We met
and 2
Noelle
on
in
my
chapter
channel. You
1,
can check
a
those
young,
out if
nervous
you
little
want. They'll be
reindeer
in the
with a crush on
playlist below
Susie.
in
And
the
immediately
description
her
box.
connections with
And
angels are obvious. First, there's her
before
outfit, a
I
flowing
dive
white
into
gown that
chapter
looks an
3
awful
and
lot
4,
like the white
I
robes that
wanted
angels are
to
depicted
get
wearing
an
in most
idea
religious
what the
artwork. During
theories
your
were
encounters with various enemy
around.
characters, we
I
refer to
did.
Noelle
Hold
as
on,
angels.
pause. 'Cause I'm pretty sure they out there.
didn't even
all that other good
notice
stuff.
her
So what I
fit.
did
Like, I didn't
was,
even notice these wings on the back.
I went to AI and I
I
asked
did not notice
AI
that.
if I wanted to know the
Heck,
theories
Noelle herself
behind
even says that
chapters
she
1
wants
and
to turn
2,
into an angel.
what
During a
would
romantic Ferris
what would
wheel
be the
ride with
best like
Susie, she says,
YouTube
quote,
videos
I
to
jump out
watch?
the
And it
window,
gave me
the dream,
4
right? I grow
videos.
big
It gave me
angel
4
wings.
wings. Yeah,
As
that's
far
what she
as I can,
said.
gazing back at it all. And then there's just a ton of Christ imagery associated with the character. At the end of chapter 2, she's in a Christ pose while being held
I
captive.
noticed
She
that
can
too.
be
I ain't
equipped
say no,
with
but
a
I
crown
did
of
notice.
thorns, much like the crown of thorns that Jesus is forced to wear during his crucifixion. Even her name Noelle is a reference to Christmas and the birth of Jesus. Seems pretty darn obvious then, right? So Noelle being the angel means that at some point she's gonna turn on all of us and we're gonna have to face her down in order to banish whatever heaven she's fighting for. Open and shut case, right? But hey, that's just a theory and all that. Well,
That is just a theory, but I found chapter 2 to be interesting on how the focus was Noelle, and the focus of like trying to make her happy, trying to like satisfy her in some shape, way, or form. I keep thinking about like control, like Noelle not having control or needing control or something like that. I don't know. But I did think it was interesting, like how the focus was on her in chapter 2.
hold on a second. Let's not jump to conclusions just yet. Way back in Undertale, Gerson the Turtle actually tells us the meaning of the Deltarune symbol. Yeah,
What
in
is
case
it?
you forgot this one, Deltarune is actually referenced all the way back in that original game. In it,
I
he
didn't-
says that
I
the
forgot about
triangles
that.
represent monsters down below, and that the winged circle in the middle represents, quote, an angel who has seen the surface and will descend from above to bring us freedom. He also mentions that people have started to call the angel an angel of death, but obviously this is a prophecy that's only relevant to Undertale, right? Azrael crossed over onto the
But
surface,
that's
attacked by
symbol
humans and
everywhere.
killed, only to then be resurrected as the vengeful Flowey, who
'Cause it's
evolves
it's
into
in
the
Chris's
all-powerful
room.
god of hyper.
And I think
Azrael's
it's,
the angel,
throughout
even
the
as ones to
chapters.
prove it, prophecy fulfilled, no need to worry about it here, right? Well, yeah, that could be the case, but the prophecy also applies in the world of Deltarune. You see, at the end of Chapter 1, you have the chance to walk around the town and interact with people, some of which you
That I
recognize,
didn't do.
others you might not. One of those unknown figures is Father Elvin, the leader of the local church that Kris attends. If you speak to him, he leaves you with these parting words.
Excuse me.
Let the angel's power light your way. The angel spoken of in Ralsei's prophecy is apparently worshipped in the Lightner world as well. This means that the angel's heaven is a force that transcends both worlds. Noelle just doesn't exist on that plane of existence. Therefore, she can't be the angel. In fact, she goes to the exact same youth group and church that worships the angel from that heaven. So overall, it wouldn't make sense for Noelle to be the angel that we hear about in the prophecy. That said, that doesn't necessarily mean she's not a pivotal piece in this prophecy coming true. In chapter 2, Noelle becomes the focus of all the action. Not only is it revealed that the cyber world was created by the queen to try and make her happy, the whole narrative hinges on Noelle finding the strength to stand up for herself and ask for what she really wants. By teaming up with Kris, recruiting enemies, and solving puzzles together, Noelle gradually becomes more confident until the climax of the chapter, when she's able to defeat the final boss simply by telling it to stop. Except that's not the only way this chapter can end. There's another route through chapter 2 known as the Snowgrave route.
I know I ain't get that.
This one is also about making Noelle stronger in a very different way. You see, in this route, instead of working together with Kris to solve puzzles and rekindle their friendship, Kris instead forces Noelle to attack in battle, kill enemies. They push her into buying expensive items against her will. They force her to wear that Ring of Thorns that I mentioned earlier, an item that's constantly ticking down Noelle's HP. And
I was like, how did he force? But like in the game, Kris, I said it again. How did they force her? They did though, because Kris tells everybody what to do. Literally everybody.
through it all, Kris is gaslighting Noelle into believing that all of it's for the best, that it's important for making her stronger, and that being stronger is the most important thing. It all culminates in the mini-boss fight against Birdly, where Kris must repeatedly push Noelle to cast the spell Snowgrave, a spell that Noelle's not familiar with or comfortable with. After resisting for a couple turns, eventually Noelle relents, casting a massive ice spell that freezes Birdly solid, a spell that, at least at the end of chapter 2, he doesn't seem to be able to wake up from. Noelle has become stronger. In fact, she's much stronger now. Her personality back in the light world has once again gotten more direct and controlling, but the journey to get there took a very different tone. So what does any of this have to do with the Angel's Heaven and the final boss of the game? Well, I gotta be honest with you, I lied a bit when I was describing how to get that Snowgrave route, because while Kris is the character on screen gaslighting Noelle and forcing her into all these uncomfortable situations, Kris isn't the one doing it. It's us, the player. And the game makes it very clear that it knows it's us. At the end of chapter 1, when Kris rips out their heart and throws it into a cage, we are...
That's very much true. That's very much true.
are still able to move that heart-shaped object while Kris pulls out their knife. At this moment, the game is making it crystal clear to us that Kris and the player are two separate
different
entities.
things.
But in chapter 2, there is much more emphasis put on us and our role in the story. The only way the Snowgrave route can happen is if we pick very specific dialogue options. Options that Noelle explicitly says are very out of character for Kris. She becomes even more aware of us when we respond to her internal monologue, something that again, Kris should never have been able to hear. At yet another point, she mentions that the voice she hears doesn't sound like Kris's. Our involvement is starting to be noticed and commented on. Back in chapter 1, the only real person to make any sort of reference to the player was Sans, who makes a joke about us having never met before and then winks, the same way he always did back in Undertale when he was pretending not to know about other timelines and universes. He knows that Kris isn't the one in control here, but now other characters are starting to become aware that there's something or someone else at work. These aren't their choices, they're our choices. And you see, that's hugely important for this game. The Snowgrave ending stands out not just because of how dark and uncomfortable it is to achieve, but also because it's the first time a player gets to do the very thing they've wanted to do since Undertale, make a choice. You see, Undertale was all about player choice. Taking a pacifist route, a genocide route, or something in between yielded vastly different gameplay experiences and endings. Your choices mattered a lot. But in the opening minutes of Deltarune, you're immediately told that your choices don't matter here.
Right. Have me doing a whole character customization thing for nothing.
only to then throw it out the window and present you with Kris. It's a moment that instantly beats you over the head with the message that your choices don't matter here. Except clearly they do, or at least seem to. In the Snowgrave route, we are literally forcing Kris and Noelle to bend to our will, which yields a completely different flow for the chapter. Berdly's frozen and maybe dead. Noelle is emotionally shaken and suspicious of Kris. Heck, we don't even end up fighting the Queen as the final boss of the chapter.
For
The
real?
characters are literally our puppets on strings, acting out the decisions that we're forcing upon them. Speaking
We
of
don't even
puppets, no
fight
one
her?
knows what it's like to have their strings pulled better than everyone's favorite salesman and secret boss, Spamton. This whole boss battle in chapter 2 is about trying to achieve
I didn't
freedom
even
where you
get- I ain't
win
going
by
nowhere
cutting
near
his
this boss.
strings. That already sends a pretty powerful message about fighting for control in your own life. That said, if you continue down the Snowgrave route, instead of meeting the Queen at the end, you fight Spamton Neo as the final boss. And it's here that he gives you some very interesting lines of dialogue. Quote, "You think making frozen chicken with your side chick is gonna let you drink up that
Not
sweet,
with your
sweet
side
freedom
chick."
sauce?" Well, you're right. Obviously, he's referring to specific events from the Snowgrave route, like the frozen chicken being Berdly and the side chick being Noelle. But what's more interesting is how he refers to Kris. If you fight Spamton during the normal route, he refers to Kris by their name. But in the Snowgrave fight, he never does that. He only refers to Chris's character as you. Now, I don't think that's because Spamton just decided to be less personable. I think it's because he's not talking to Kris. He's talking to us. He's breaking the fourth wall. Later on in that fight, you have to call your friends for help. And every time it says Kris called for help. But when you call out to Noelle, it suddenly changes to you whispered Noelle's name. Noelle suddenly answers when everyone else has been silent because that's the voice that's been leading her throughout the Snowgrave ending. It's the voice that she obeys. It's the voice that she's afraid of. Our voice. The use of the word you here is directly addressing the player because we're the one breaking away from the main pacifist route in the game in favor of a more violent path. A path that forces our choices to be obeyed. And as Spamton says, we're right to do this because choice equals freedom. Quote, "This power is freedom. I won't have to be a puppet anymore." Just like the angel from Undertale's prophecy, we're bringing freedom to these characters. We're allowing other options for their story. In short, we, the players, we are the angel. We're the ones who are able to transcend both the light world and the dark world. We're the ones able to control the characters and light their way. We're the ones coming in from on high and bringing them a form of freedom. Except obviously, it's not real freedom. They're just subservient to us now, bending to our choices. We are the angel, and our reality is the angel's
So
heaven.
who gonna
But
be
if
the
that's
human?
true, then we are the villain of Deltarune. Thinking back to chapter 1, it was actually quite fitting that the world revolved around chess pieces. Kris and their friends are basically pawns in our little game. We're controlling everything they do, but just like in the dark world, these pieces have real characters, thoughts.
So if we going with that, right? If we going that Kris is the villain and is the angel, which Kris being the villain, that's what it after chapter 2, that's what it looked like. You know what I'm saying? So that's not the shocker right there. My thing is, if Kris is the villain, if Kris is the angel, who is the human that's supposed to be in the trio? So now it's a thing of which prophecy is actually the prophecy, right? Like, is the Deltarune prophecy of the angel coming down to save the monsters, to save the monsters or free the monsters, the true one? Or is it the 3 heroes and the fountain stuff? I mean, it's a possibility it could be both, but it's like, how do they again, if it's both, how do they connect with each other if we're saying Kris is going to be the angel? So is it coming down to us as the player choosing whether or not Kris is going to be the human that saves or the angel that doesn't? Is that where we're going?
Feelings, and yet here we are just playing with them for our own entertainment. We are the thing that needs to be banished from Kris's body, from the lives of their friends, and that, loyal theorists, is how Deltarune is gonna end.
It's not Kris is the angel. We're the angel. But still, the choice is still there whether or not we're gonna play as the human, or are we gonna play as the angel?
It's like the prophecy said, Kris, Susie, and Ralsei are gonna banish the angels' heaven, which means they're gonna work together to reject us one final time, kick us out of the game. Kris will rip us out of their body, and suddenly we're gonna have to face them as the final boss of this whole thing. And from there, Toby Fox will either force us to lose, or we'll be given a final choice, a chance to choose whether we fight for domination and control over these characters that we've grown with over the last 7 chapters, or if instead we're gonna respect their autonomy and let them
Burley's
live their own
face.
life. But hold on, doesn't this conflict with the opening of the game that our choices don't
matter?
Here seems to be the thesis of Deltarune. Well, here's the thing. Looking at the Snowgrave route, our choices didn't really end up mattering all that much. We see it throughout Chapter 2. The endings are basically the same regardless of whether you play it normally or choose Snowgrave. Noelle gets stronger regardless. In both routes, the queen's defeated, she becomes good, we escape the dark world, and we go to see Noelle with her father in the hospital. Noelle's still playing her video game, and she's more confident than she was at the beginning of the chapter. Sure, Birdley might be dead, but it's more likely that he's passed out. Regardless, though, the ending doesn't
She gave
change
him.
in its essential.
So essentially, she gave Birdley brain freeze. That's what I'm getting. Or she gave him some NyQuil. What is it?
Components. But by doing the Snowgrave route and changing Noelle's journey to be one full of trauma and abuse, the dialogue options and relationships change. Noelle is more aggressive and doesn't want to give up control of the game. She's scared of Kris rather than seeing them as a friend. She is literally traumatized by what Kris, or more specifically what we did to her. Sure, the decisions we make, like Snowgrave, might not affect the events that we see play out at the end of the game, but the journey is going to be different. And that journey is going to change things, like subtext and the emotions underneath all these actions. In the end, we are absolutely going to get booted out of these characters' lives one way or another. Our choices can't affect that, but the journey is ultimately going to dictate how painful that process is going to be. Spamton even warns us of this during the Snowgrave Neo fight. He talks about our path to freedom, but follows it up with, quote, "Well, don't blame me when you're crying in a broken home wishing you let your old pal Spamton kill ya." Makes it sound like freedom is going to leave us sad and alone. Not
you in a
fulfilled
broken
like we won
home?
some sort of a game. That's the whole point. By making these choices, by exercising freedom, we're actually dooming these characters to a more miserable life. And eventually, they're gonna fight back and banish us for good. Once Kris separates themselves from our control, they'll all have their freedom back, and the events of the ending may stay the same, but the context behind those events is gonna be different. Susie, Birdley, Noelle, they may all still hang out together, but are they gonna be hanging out because they're friends, or are they gonna be hanging out because they're afraid of Kris and the things that we made Kris do? Toby Fox used Undertale to prove that humanity was overall good, breaking away from the cycle of violence that RPGs force players into. But in Deltarune, as soon as the opportunity for a new ending showed up, we showed our true colors. We were willing to throw these characters and their lives aside if it meant that we got more of that sweet, sweet juice content. So,
Not
despite what
juice
we've been told,
content.
I'm convinced that we do have a choice in this game. Are we going to be kind and give these characters the best possible ending, or are we going to be a monster like Azrael, the final boss that leaves them all broken and with nothing, all so we can get that sweet, sweet sense of completion? But hey, that's just a theory.
Toby is
a
in this.
game theory.
Toby is this. Okay. All right. That was an interesting theory. Okay. Now, I really am convinced that at the, we're affecting something to some degree. I like the fact that he had said that, yeah, you may get the same ending. Like, yeah, the ending is going to be the ending. It's the middle part that matters. So, yeah. Good one. Next. All right. So, the next theory video we are watching is from Mystic Slime. What is Kris's plan? When did they do that? This was 2 years ago when they uploaded it. So, let's get into it. Somebody commented that this is a gas
in my
leak,
first
and I
big
think that was
theory
just
video,
hilarious.
I mentioned the whole third entity theory, and why I thought it was a little bit outlandish to actually fit into the story of Deltarune. The theory basically argues that there is a third entity inside of Kris besides the player and, well, Kris themselves. The main points of evidence for this are the 3 save files and Kris's sometimes weird actions when we aren't in control. However, there is one huge piece of evidence towards this theory that can't be overlooked. The fact that Kris hatches a crazy plan to make a Dark Fountain after Chapter 2, even after a Snowgrave route.
Okay, hold on. So they're saying, there's 3 players in play. When it comes to Kris, it's Kris themselves, it's us, the player, and then there's something else. Because, all right, check me out. Because how Noelle talks to Kris, they've known Kris all Kris's life. They've, they childhood besties forever. And how Noelle kind of describes Kris is Kris as like this nice, quiet person. That's how she describes Kris, right? So my thing is, she will know Kris better than us, the player, whatever. She knows Kris, right? When we have Kris, we have a choice to make, whether or not they're gonna be pacifist or not, right? Even though I'm bouncing off of Matt Pat's joint, even though the ending is gonna be saying, how we make the choices for Kris would determine how the journey looks, right? But then there's a third one, and I had thought of, and I'm glad they pointed this out, because once Kris takes us out of their chests and tosses us to the side, Kris becomes, I guess you say, quote unquote, evil, bad, or something like that. Kris is not themselves. They're not, think about it, they're not the person that Noelle describes. They are something different. They are something different. And we're not making the choice for them to do whatever it is they do. Like in the first chapter, they went and ate the whole pie, whatever. Second chapter, they out there slashing tires and opening fountains. That's not something we did, and that's not something that is, it should be typical for them based off how Noelle knows Kris, who has known Kris for a long periodically time.
The fact that Kris would witness the player manipulating a close friend to kill a classmate and a ton of Darkners, and then choose to open another Dark Fountain to allow the same thing to happen again, just doesn't make much sense. And it leads most to the conclusion that there must be another entity inside of Kris that was responsible for this. And while this isn't to
because
deny
we're the heart
third entity theory entirely,
that Kris keeps taking out,
you that there's actually a good explanation for Kris's actions here? What if I told you that Kris is not only rational here, but that it might even be a good plan?
Hold on.
During this video, I'm going to show you another perspective of Kris's actions that I believe makes much more sense. Before we start the video though, make sure to subscribe. Only about 5% of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed.
That's about everybody, baby. It's the same. My analytics look the same way.
So I promise I'll make it work.
Matter of fact, no cap, my analytics look like that. How about y'all subscribe? Enjoy the galaxy, baby.
That said though, let's get on to the theory. First, let's go over what Kris's plan actually is and what we see them do. Well, after Susie is welcomed into their house by Toriel, Kris forces a sleepover by slashing Toriel's car tires. Meaning that
Now wait. They didn't force the sleepover. The sleepover was already in play. It was already in play. Toriel was going outside to get the sugar for the pie or something like that. I think it was just going to get the sugar for the pie. And she saw that the tires were slashed and was like, oh, we'll make the pie some other time. But the sleepover, just play this game out. But the sleepover was already in effect by the time it was time to make the pie. Was it? Was it? Was it? I'm gonna have to go. Back and look. I have to go back and look. She influences you. Leave the chalk alone, all right? Oh, so everybody knows Susie eats chalk. Oh, they all know. Hands washed. Wonderful. Now we can. Oh, Kris, how about you show Susie how to bake it? Kris, you know how to make a pie? The hell have you made me any? You. I was wrong. I'm wrong. Kris forced that. Kris literally forced that. Okay.
Kris's plan actually is, and what we see them
do.
Well, after Susie is welcomed into their house by Toriel, Kris forces a sleepover by slashing Toriel's car tires, meaning that Toriel can no longer drive Susie home. Afterwards, Kris hears Toriel call the police from the other room, and then sees Toriel drift off to sleep with Susie in the living room. It's here that Kris then turns on the TV, opens the door,
yeah, that
and
TV part was
creates
important.
A dark fountain right in the middle of the living room, before putting their soul back in and finally drifting back to sleep themselves.
Or putting us back in.
I'd like to ask you something. If you woke up and had your body possessed for 2 straight days and nobody around you knew, what would you do? I imagine that if most of us were in Kris's situation, we'd try to go to the people that we trust the most for help. Even if they aren't strong enough to do anything about what's happening, they would at least notice that we're acting much differently than we normally do, and that something is wrong. Now I ask you, what does Kris do at the end of Chapter 2? They set up a dark fountain in their own home, and bring Susie and Toriel into it, 2 of the people that Kris trusts the most in this world. Not only
I would think it would be
but
Noelle.
they even unlock the door so that the police can come help if anything goes awry in their plan. Kris probably knows from Chapter 1 that we the player can't manipulate Susie, no matter how hard we try. And if Susie didn't make that clear in Chapter 1, then she certainly did in Chapter 2. Toriel would also know if there is something wrong with Kris, or if they are acting differently. I mean, I'd hope that Kris's own mother would notice her own child acting strange.
You'd be surprised.
And in the case of
you'd
this
be
taking
surprised.
place
You know,
after a
and this is not to say that people are being bad parents. What typically happens, especially when like a child becomes like a teenager, the child basically start acting different and stuff like that, and sometimes parents just be like, it must be something to do with them becoming a teenager, because like people do start to change as they become a teenager, because they figure themselves out. It's hormones flying all over the place. They just flying, child. They popping off all over the place. All kind of feelings and thoughts and body growing, all kind of stuff is happening around that time. So yeah, you may see some behavior changes, maybe even some personality changes with the teenager. So sometimes parents read that as my child is just being a teenager. You know what I'm saying? Like, especially like sleeping a lot, or being in a room a lot, not wanting to like engage with like the family like that and stuff like that. Like they just like, oh, they're just being a teenager. Even though those same signs can like mean something is wrong, sometimes you just don't read it that way. Sometimes you really just don't read it that way, especially if you have not heard or seen anything outside of that would be like, oh yeah, they've like something happened, something's going wrong, you know, in the case may be. And then teenagers had the tendency, I know because I did it, had the tendency not to want to talk and tell their parents anything, or very little, about what's going on with them, how they feeling, how they thinking, because it's a misconception that the parent won't understand. So why would I talk to them anyway? They don't understand. So yeah. So him saying, "Oh, I would hope to think like their own mother would notice something different going on." Even if she did, she may have, blamed it on something else. Especially since around this time, Chris's brother left. Chris's brother is in college, so that can have some kind of emotional effect and change Chris's behavior. You know what I'm saying? Like, that could also happen, and Toriel could be like, "Oh, the behavior." If she saw something, the behavior is probably caused because the brother is gone, and my child is having a reaction and is going through something as they're trying to figure out and navigate their brother being gone. And as y'all see, Kris does not talk much. They don't say too much of anything. So even if Toriel was to come to Kris and try to communicate with Kris or ask Kris what's going on, Kris may not say anything anyway, because Kris typically don't talk. I just wanted to say that, Lou.
Snowgrave's route in Chapter 2, something tells me that it's going to be a lot harder to manipulate Toriel as a grown adult than a scared and innocent childhood friend. Kris knows that Susie and Toriel will both come with them to the Dark World, and who better to choose than the two people closest to you. Even in the case of Chapter 2 ending in a Snowgrave route, Kris probably imagines that there is little risk here. Again, Susie has proven herself capable of resisting our control, and Toriel will have much stronger willpower as an adult, or at the very least, will notice something different about Kris.
Will she?
Whether we committed a Snowgrave run or not,
she might be
Kris's
one of the
plan
moms,
here
but I'm
makes
just
it
gonna
much
do with
more
my baby
likely that
ass.
someone will at least notice what's going on with them. So, what about the police then? Kris opens the door presumably so that the police will be able to get in. But why?
I did
Well,
peep that
this
they
could have definitely
opened the
been an
door,
impromptu
but I
addition to the plan
didn't even put
after
that together.
hearing
At
Toriel
first, I
call
thought they
the
was gonna
police,
leave.
making sure that if Toriel is somehow manipulated, then at least the police will be there to help prevent anything bad from happening. This actually does go a bit deeper though. In Chapter 2, we see that Kris is much more open about sharing things about the Dark World to Undyne, even if she doesn't believe them at all. In addition, earlier that same day, Kris saw Undyne lifting a car during the
These are
traffic jam,
facts.
which
These are
means that they
facts.
know Undyne is an incredibly strong person, more than capable of defending herself. These two details make it clear that Kris not only knows the police
And in Undertale, Undyne is a bad bitch.
have to protect themselves, but also that Kris trusts them enough to tell them about the Dark World. Even if Undyne didn't believe Kris in the police station, she'll definitely
I ain't do none of
believe
this,
them
to
when
be
she
honest.
gets to
Like,
experience
I
the
went
Dark
straight
World
home.
firsthand. And that's basically it. It's a pretty good explanation all around for why Kris does what they do. Even in the case of a Snowgrave wait. I think I'm forgetting something.
Okay. Who is that in the TV? Yes. Who's that in the TV? Whose mouth is that? Whose mouth is that?
Oh, right. The TV. Kris deliberately turns the TV back on in the ending cutscene. But why? You know, I was actually stumped by this for a long time in making this theory. Every other part of this plan has a pretty good explanation that essentially involves bringing strong and trustable people into the Dark World. Except turning on the TV.
That TV.
However, I have a thought of two possible explanations that solve this issue. My first explanation involves Spamton, and specifically Mike. Now, look, I know that there is a lot of mystery around Mike, and he might just end up being a reference to the Big Shot soda ads. However, there is one detail that we learn about Mike from Spamton.
Okay.
He's the man on TV, and Spamton describes him as a game show host. Spamton warns Kris about meeting Mike and overall paints a picture of Mike as a friend who betrayed him. But considering that Spamton parallels Kris's situation scarily well, it makes me think that Kris might go to Mike to find out more about Spamton. If Kris can find out more about how Spamton got in the predicament he's in, maybe they can get more clues about their own situation. Thus, what better way to get in contact with a TV salesman than to make a TV-themed Dark World, where Kris might be able to meet Mike and learn more about Spamton through him. This is a pretty good theory, but there is one issue with it. We don't always get to hear these lines about Mike in every route of the game.
Nah, because I ain't getting none of that.
Still turning on the TV no matter what we do. There is still another theory I have for Kris turning on the TV, though. What if Kris turns on the TV to make some of his favorite TV show characters into Darkners? It's a bit of a stretch, but if you had the ability to make them real for a
Yeah, I'm gonna say that's stretch.
short period of time, then wouldn't you want some of your favorite fictional characters to help you out too? While it is somewhat of a childish idea, Kris is still pretty young themselves. Plus, wouldn't any kid have the thought of doing this if they realized they could turn any inanimate object into reality? It definitely
Okay, hold on. Okay. We're going off this theory. I'm gonna take away the three person part. It's just us, and then there's Kris. And you know, us, we're the heart, right? We're the heart. I'm gonna take the third evil entity that I had said. It's just Kris and us. Combining it with that Pat's theory of like the Deltarune prophecy of the angel, and us as the player is actually the baddie and the angel. So when Kris takes us out of their heart or of their chest, because we're the heart, and they take us out, right? They then may be trying to set up a situation, and I'm combining with old buddy right here saying they're then as themselves are trying to set up a situation where again they have people that they trust come into this world with them, and the reason why they turned the TV on is for us. Like they're trying to face us, the baddie, the angel, whatever. They're trying to face us in some shape, way, or form because they're trying to get rid of us. Because mind you, at first I was like, oh, the behaviors that Kris is doing, the behaviors that Kris are doing, it don't match what Noelle would say. Say who Kris is. But if I'm looking at Kris's action in a different perspective, Kris really hasn't done anything. The first chapter, all Kris did was eat the pie. That's all Kris did. Toriel was like, hey Kris, don't eat this pie. Don't eat all the pie like you did last time. Telling us Kris loved pie. Same. And if we were in Kris, we probably would, it would been a possibility that we might have prevented Kris from eating the pie or something like that. So he took us out and was like, I'm about to go get this pie, because that's all they did. They didn't do anything else but eat that pie and go to bed. That's all they did, right? In chapter 2, if we're saying that Kris is trying to set up a situation where they are making sure that they have two people they know that can resist us, the heart, can resist our commands, and can fend for themselves because Susie got hands, and Susie was throwing them hands. First chapter, Susie was throwing them hands. She was throwing them hands. It wasn't until by like chapter 2, she was like, hey, no, it was chapter 2. It was like later in chapter 1. But anyway, then she was like, hey, I want to learn how to act, da, 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 da. You know what I'm saying? But before then, she was knocking heads loose. She was knocking heads loose. So he does know. They do know. I'm trying, y'all. They do know that Susie can handle themselves, and they're assuming that an adult can handle themselves in this world. And they turn on that TV. So I think they really trying to draw us out, the baddie out, and trying to get rid of this thing. That's what I'm going with right now.
Has much less supporting evidence for it, but I could honestly see this happening if one of these two theories ends up being true. And that's basically my theory on what Kris's real plan is for Chapter 3. I'd like to shout out TigerShark859 for inspiring this video from a theory video of their own. To be honest, I actually talked with a friend about this theory way back when Chapter 2 first came out, but forgot about it until I saw Tiger Shark's video on it. However, while watching the video,
understand, child, you be
noticed
having
that
them
our main
thoughts
evidence
and they
for the
will
theory
go
was
away if
very
you don't act on
different,
them.
So I wanted to make my own video covering the theory. I know that this interpretation of Kris's plan doesn't involve any 4D chess or anything wild like that. And
4D
while I
chess.
may cover some crazy theories about it later on, we have to remember that Kris is still just a kid in elementary school after all. I'm not saying it's impossible.
They're in elementary school? I must have missed that. Everything I was talking about, the teenager stuff, throw that out the way. Throw it away. What? Elementary school.
For them to have a complex plan or anything, but just that I find it much more fitting that Kris would have a simpler plan like this due to their age. Anyways, if you want to see more theories like this, I'll be uploading them every week, so make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to see them. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.
Alright. Woo! That elementary school thing got me. Whoa, that got me real good. But yeah, I enjoyed this theory. I really did. I do like the fact it's Kris trying to set something up, and not in a bad way, because when you like initially looking at it, you're like, yo, Kris is wilding. Like, what is going on? Kris is so it's an evil being, something going on, and it's in Kris, and they out here wilding. But it may be a possibility that Kris is really just trying to set this thing up in a way to be the hero. Because again, the prophecy, you need the human. Okay? So, yeah. Next. All right. So, the next one is by the creator Kris Roomba. And the video is remember those old Deltarune Chapter 1 theories. Maybe I should have had this one first. Well, they just posted this like 4 months ago. So, yeah, let's get it.
Which means the next chapters of Deltarune are allegedly coming sometime this year. And if you thought the community has gone crazy in the years since Chapter 2, imagine
Not
what
they
it was
gone
like when
crazy.
we only had one chapter. today I want to briefly go over a bunch of old Deltarune theories from 2018 to 2021, the
Okay.
time period between chapters 1 and 2. Because as far as I'm concerned, the only person who got anything right was Scott Falco.
Kris throws you the
Okay,
key so you can't
Scott.
stop them from getting out, and because they're sick of you controlling them. The knife is to cut the pie. Duh.
It's pretty interesting to see what people thought of the game and what direction they predicted it would go in back when we only had 1/7 of the full release. Which is totally different from now, of course, as we're trying to predict the ending with 2/7 of the story. So let's dive into all these old theories, point and laugh at how ridiculous they are, and hope all our
Not
current
point and
theories don't age as
laugh.
poorly.
Not point and laugh at her.
Solid squad. DPS. Heal.
A pretty widespread theory back in Chapter 1 was that the Dark World, singular, was nothing but a figment of the imagination. Everything we experienced in Chapter 1 was just a dramatic visualization of Kris and Susie playing together in the closet. The prophecy, the darkness, and everything that happened was entirely made up by the two friends' imaginations, which is pretty awesome that Kris and Susie have the same nuanced narrative writing skills of the talented indie game developer who made Undertale. I feel like this theory didn't make sense even within the context of Chapter 1. Like, Susie was well established as a bully who hated Kris. Why would they be playing in the closet together? Susie's
Yeah.
entire character arc in Chapter 1 is a product of the people she met and the experiences she had. It wouldn't make sense that she just made all of that up and then became a nicer person. Now, obviously, this theory has been well disproven by now, as the Dark Worlds aren't entirely imaginary. I think this theory just kind of formed as an explanation for why the items in the closet seemed to turn into the darkness. At the time, that was our explanation for it. In the end, though, it wasn't the power of imagination, silly. It was magic, or I guess more accurately, determination. Speaking of which... So, this
Yeah, the whole
scene-
Chara and Kris thing.
Remember, this was back in 2018. All the middle schoolers way too young to be on Tumblr were obsessed with the funny guy at the end of the genocide route. So you can imagine the insane reaction to
Not all
what is
the
now
middle
the
schoolers.
iconic Chapter 1 cliffhanger. The thing is, it's pretty understandable that people would jump to this conclusion, completely ignoring the fact that this is an alternate universe. Deltarune framed itself as a post-pacifist continuation before alluding to Undertale's genocide route.
Oh,
at
so
the
this is
end. So most people
post-pacifist.
believe that
Okay.
Deltarune would be a genocide route sequel, and that Chapter 2 would just be Kris going around and doing murder. I don't think we exactly knew that there were going to be 7 chapters back then, or if we did, most people
Oh, it's gonna be
kinda
7
just
chapters? I didn't
ignored
know.
it. So a lot
Boy,
of
I'm out
predictions
the
for Chapter
loop.
2 were just that everyone is gonna die. It's gonna be so edgy, and the UI is gonna be all red, and the narrator is gonna be red text Kara. I think this is a classic example of people making predictions based on what would be cool in a fan fiction rather than, you know, good writing. And actually, most of the theories that aged poorly tend to fall into that trap. Keep that in mind for all your Chapter 3 and 4
Well, yeah, and
predictions.
also-
Anyways, one of the big ideas for a genocide.
And also, you know, as players, people, fans, and all this other stuff, don't know like what the creator themselves have in mind. We don't know what Toby had in mind. We just didn't know. Job led to the game as if I was back then. I was there back then playing this game. I just played this game a couple weeks ago. Anyway, like, you just don't know. So you are just making guesses and stuff like that. And what humans tend to do when they have their own theories, their own thoughts, opinions, etc., 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 and don't have necessarily like hard-hitting facts. Humans, this is a human thing. Humans tend to like take bits and pieces and make it fit into the narrative, whatever narrative they come up with. They do that, and that's simply because the brain itself likes to solve things. It wants things to be completed. It wants things to be done. That's what the brain does, and it also likes shortcuts. So it was shortcutting something in a heartbeat. That's just the human brain. Now, fundamentally, there's nothing wrong with that. When it starts becoming a problem is when you are presented with more information, or you actually are presented with the facts, and you still hold on to whatever it is that you created in your mind. You created that. You created that. And you hold on tight to that. Now, again, that's also part of the brain too, because the brain don't like to be wrong. It doesn't like to be wrong. But a certain amount of growth needs to happen when you have these ideas and stuff like that, these narratives and these ideas, these opinions, or whatever the case may be, and you don't piece it together with random stuff. When you start getting the facts and stuff like that, it's time to reopen the case. It's time to reopen it. And you know, because even me throughout this entire video looking at these theories. Now, mind you, these are just theories. I don't change things. I'm still piecing together, putting together, But once I'm getting hit with different facts and information and possibilities and stuff like that, I start to think about, okay, if that is a possibility, this, that, and the third, and the fourth. Some people, I'm all going off on a tangent. Some people can't get past their own stuff and take in the new information and apply it or even reason with it. I'm gonna stop.
Aside route chapter 2 was that Susie would take a stand against Kris and be sort of the final boss in a sense. A full circle moment for Susie's character growth in chapter 1, which has since evolved into the idea that Susie would be a final boss in the weird route as she stands against the player's manipulation of Noelle. And maybe Megalovania plays when you fight.
I don't
Which brings
even
us
want
to
Susie.
Guys, Santa's gonna
I don't even
show
want
up at
Susie
the
to
end
be
of
the bad
Deltarune
guy.
and exorcise the demons
I like
out
the
of
growth
Kris
in
to
Susie,
finally
but
get his
that's-
revenge on Kara.
that's just what
but
I
only
want.
after we help rescue Papyrus from his older brother / dad / grandpa W.D. Gaster. To be fair, Sans did ask Kris to hang out with his brother in chapter 1, but since when did our choices matter in this game anyways? Probably the funniest theory to look back on was people just killing off Rudy in chapter 2.
There's a reason Chevy is called the heartbeat of America. A heartbeat strong.
Again, completely oblivious to the fact that there were going to be more than 2 chapters probably. Going deeper into it though, there was actually a lot of evidence to suggest that chapter 2 was going to center around Noelle and Rudy, and that the Dark World would take place in the hospital. This is mainly because, between the release of chapters 1 and 2, Toby posted a few teasers for the development of chapter 2 online. We got to see a new outfit for Noelle and even her own theme song, suggesting that she'd have a bigger role in the story and potentially even join us in the Dark World. Look, her sprite has different colored hair. We also got to look at the fun gang in hospital outfits.
Everybody got different.
Fighting these
It
new
kind of looked different when they hit the
antivirus-themed
Dark World.
enemies. Combined with the emphasis on Rudy's health condition in chapter 1's post-game feeling almost
Excuse
like
me.
a teaser for what's to come, which, I mean, it is. It absolutely made sense to assume the next chapter would take place in a hospital-themed Dark World. And of course, I don't think a
Yeah.
hospital chapter is off
Yo,
the table
that
either,
thing
but I'm
being
not
at the
surprised
front
it didn't
desk.
happen this early in the game. Chapter 2 really felt like it was solidifying the Deltarune
I'm not
formula
going in.
so that we could have an understanding of what to expect in the future. Each chapter gives us a new Dark World location, a new party member potentially, a secret boss, all that stuff. It'll be interesting to see how Toby expands and iterates on this formula in future chapters. Finally, for possibly the most poorly aged prediction,
Okay, the Queen.
the Queen seemed like this ominous figure teased only briefly in chapter 1. A bigger, badder evil, greater than the king we just faced. There were mentions of the knight as well, who seemed to be able to create dark fountains, but many people assumed the
Yeah.
queen was even above him
'Cause
in
he
terms
mentioned
of
it, didn't he?
power and authority. A truly looming threat
About the
that we
knight
weren't
creating-
yet prepared to face. Yeah, it turns out she's
About
just
the
this
knight
goofy internet
creating
meme computer thing.
fountains.
Not even related to the card
Don't
theme
Kris
of the
got
first
a knight
chapter, which
outfit
is
on?
also something
It
people
kinda-
thought would
they
continue.
kinda like
It's
a
really
knight.
funny to see how seriously the fandom treated Queen prior to her reveal, compared to how completely unserious she actually turned out to be.
She was.
In fact,
She was
there's
very
only
much
one
unserious and
widespread
hilarious.
prediction I can think of
Nah,
that aged
look
worse
at
than
her.
this one.
Not how I look at her. She kind of remind me of the little opera singer from Fifth Element. I just looked at her head just now. That long head.
which is that the entire game would be done soon. Like I said, we can only hope that our current theories aren't immediately disproven in the first scene of the next chapter again. The opening of chapter 2 really did disprove a lot of old Deltarune theories. It's almost like Toby loves subverting our expectations in opening sequences. Imagine chapter 3 starts and the knight jumps down. He's his own entity.
Toby understands like what story they want to tell, and so when they saw people going to the left, it was like, let me throw this in there so they get back on track because they lost the plot.
He's literally like a chessboard knight. And he says, "It's me, I'm the knight, not Kris." And then Kris wakes up in the hospital dark world. I don't know, I'm curious to see how we'll look back on this era of Deltarune theories. Whether we'll all be heralded as prophets, or whether chess theory and second voice theory are just completely wrong. As you might have noticed by now, this is a brand new channel. It's going to be completely dedicated to Deltarune
this is
video
a
essays,
new channel.
and I'm going to be posting here every single week until chapters 3 and 4 come out.
The time.
And of course, when they do come out,
y'all.
I'll probably be posting
I really do.
even
I got
more.
so much
So
going on.
subscribe to stay tuned for all of that and to help this channel.
Oh,
grow. I
yeah,
don't know. Let's see if we
please.
can hit 1,000 subscribers before chapters 3 and 4, whenever that may be. Who knows?
Aw.
And form a little community of our
Did he
own. That'd be
make it?
nice. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you
He
all
made
next week.
it. Aw. All right. Well, that was fun to like look at like the theories that were coming out for chapter 1. Cause I'm not gonna lie. Like had I played chapter 1 back then, heck, when I played chapter 1 a few weeks ago, I again, I would have been like, oh, Kris is up to no good. It's up to no good. And I kind of let it go a little bit when I started playing chapter 2, when Torio came and was like, you ate the pie. Like, what? You ate the pie? I'm like, okay. You know that. And then we get to the end of chapter 2. I was like, okay, now, what's happening? But I did appreciate seeing all the old theories. Next. All right, the last one we are watching today is from Puppet Wraith. Now they've done a theory. That's wrong heroes theory. Deltarune Chapters 1. Oh, I can't do this. Yeah. So we're gonna go ahead. Get out of there. So I'm gonna actually react to that once I am done with chapters 3 and 4. But we're gonna go ahead and wrap this video up. I appreciate everybody who watched the video, and if you like the video, make sure you like it and subscribe so you can join the galaxy, and I will see you next time. Peace.